Hi, and welcome to FaithWorks. I'm David Shearman. FaithWorks is a program about the people of Grey County and the things they do in their faith, their works. My guest today is Colleen Trask-Seaman, and we're going to be talking about Oshare, where she is volunteer coordinator, host, major domo, all kinds of those things. Colleen, welcome. Good to have you here.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Now, the last time I had you on, you were headed off to China, totally different context, and
Yes.
and now you've changed jobs and you landed at Oshare.
I did, yes, yeah.
How long have you been with Oshare?
Well, I've been with Oshare since the beginning, first on the board, the founding board, and then stayed on the board, and then in June took the position of Director of Operations, part-time, and became full-time in October.
Okay. So it sounds like Oshare has been going through changes.
We have, yes. So we, in 2013, started in February, and at that time had hired Peggy,
Yes.
who has done a fabulous job as
And
our director.
Peggy has sat in that chair where you're sitting and told us all about the Oshare story. So,
Yes.
But I know that Oshare stemmed from a vision to fill a gap in the city, that there was no place for people to gather to eat a meal who had difficulties or whatever. There was no communal place to eat.
Correct, yes.
And it was kind of, I recall, it was a very interesting process because people were sort of came out of the woodwork. It was a raging success.
Yeah, it was amazing. I remember the first kind of town hall meeting that we
Yes.
had, and just the number of people that showed up to support and to ask questions and to join and do whatever they could really was just absolutely amazing.
Now you're still at the Harmony Center, right?
Yes, yeah, we are in the lower level, and it's a great facility.
Yeah.
And we really love the shared concept. It's a neat facility in the sense that while we're serving dinner, I can hear dancers upstairs or music playing or choirs singing. You never know
That's
what's
right.
going to happen upstairs, and so it's really nice atmosphere to work in.
Yeah, yeah. And the nice thing about the location is it's central to downtown, and it's easy to get to, although it's not an accessible building yet.
Yes, that's the key. We've been working with the Harmony Center, and they've been working very hard since we moved in. And we're actually starting to see some grant money coming in, which is
nice.
exciting. And so hopefully we will be accessible soon. That is definitely top priority for them and for us.
That's great, because I know one of the issues with churches and old churches, which is what the Harmony Center is that they were built and designed for a totally different era, totally different era. And as a result, those things that we take for granted as being essential, like accessibility, weren't even thought of. And so we are the heirs to that.
Yes. No, and definitely for some of our guests, it does impact how they are able to access our service.
Yeah.
Some people we do to-go meals for because they aren't able to get there. Other people help them down the stairs, or even strollers, because we do have lots of younger families, and so
That's true.
trying to get your stroller into there is sometimes an interesting adjustment.
I know my daughter has two small children and a stroller, and one of the considerations for where she lives is that it is accessible with a stroller, because not all places are easy to get into at all.
No, and you don't want to leave it outside, especially the weather that we
Right.
kind of have here. So you don't want to go back out to a foot of snow on your stroller. So
Yeah, you don't want the kids to get wet.
Exactly,
Among other
so.
things. Yeah, and then the whole issue of wheelchair accessibility is important too.
yeah.
Yeah. Now, how many people does Oshare serve on a given evening?
We serve between 80 to 100 per night on a monthly average. Sometimes the beginning of the month is a bit lower, and then by the end of the month we're back up to our 100. But yeah, it's a busy spot.
You know, it's interesting. We're taping this, or we're having this conversation in mid-January. I've always found that January was the cruelest month, the longest month for people who live on the margins. And the reason is, and I don't think people realize this, is the government issues all of the December checks a week early.
Yes.
Before Christmas, usually around the 20th, 21st, somewhere in there.
This year it was like the 18th.
Yes.
It was very early.
And so all of a sudden, they've got to go from, basically, they've got to go 6 weeks right through until the end of January. But because I don't know whether people realize this, but Ontario Works and ODSP come out on the last business day of the month. And Old Age Security comes out usually about the 27th, 28th of the month. So they're all in that same block. And for people right now, in this time period, it's hard. It's really hard.
It's a long time, that's for sure. And you have the Christmas time in there, which is always a more expensive time, no matter who you are. And so that's a really big piece for us that we're seeing in January. Yeah. It's definitely a hard month.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I was in active ministry that we would always, January was, we'd always be prepared for it, because in January we'd start to see an uptick in requests for assistance. And usually it began about the middle of the month. Yeah. About the middle of the month. So I hope people will have an understanding of how difficult it is when you live on a very, very restricted income. Very restricted income. There's a number of other things I want to get into actually after we go to break, but very, very quickly, how many people does it take to serve an Oshare meal? We serve, or our volunteers, we usually try and have between 8 to 10 per night, because we want to try and get our volunteers out of there to get home for their dinner as well. Sure. So yeah, between 8 to 10, and we usually have 1 to 2 volunteers in the afternoon to help prepare with our cook grace. That's actually kind of interesting, because you've got a very high volunteer to user ratio, about 1 volunteer for every 10. Yeah. Which is really kind of interesting. Yeah. Well, we're going to take a quick break, Colleen, and we're going to come back and we're going to hear more about Oshare. I'm David Shearman. This is FaithWorks. We'll be right back. Hi, and welcome back to FaithWorks. I'm David Shearman. My guest today is Colleen Seaman, and we're talking about that well-known Owen Sound, dare I say it, institution, Oshare. Colleen, welcome back. I realized I called it an institution, but when you've been around for a few years, as Oshare has been, yeah, you're an institution. One of our goals was to be sustainable, and definitely that has been a piece that we've always tried to keep in sight when we've been making all our decisions, is that we want to stay sustainable. We want our people to trust that tomorrow we'll still be there. And that's so important, because we know that food security is an absolutely critical issue for people on the edges. We take for granted that we can go into a grocery store and buy what we need. Well, when you're on a very limited and fixed income, that ain't the case. And sometimes it runs out. Yes. And I think that it's a big piece for our guests, is just that stability, knowing that we're going to be there. Yeah. We started a lunch program recently on Saturdays because there was no services provided over the weekend. Yeah. And so we do a lunch to go program, and it has amazed me how even every week still, we've been going since December 4th, every week they say to me, so is that lunch program still running tomorrow? And I'm always thankful that I can say yes, but just that mindset that we could still end a program is a sad reality for them. I think it's a sad commentary on how we value things in our community and in our country. If I may be permitted an editorial comment, if people have to ask, will this meal be here? I have to think, whoa, that says a lot about how people perceive their sense of security, and it sends a real message to those of us in the who have enough, that there are a whole lot of people who don't.
Mm-hmm.
A whole lot of people who don't. I noticed your language, Colleen. You use the word guests. Is that deliberate?
Yes, because they are our guests.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We very much try and have Oshare be like a family.
Yeah.
And just like we would invite guests into my home, we see Oshare as that. And we want our guests to feel that they are just coming in as part of our larger community family,
Mm-hmm.
to be served and to enjoy fellowship with each other and socialize and get to know our volunteers and the other guests that we have.
Right. And I think that's actually it's more than just a term. It's in some ways, doesn't it give dignity?
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't want them to ever feel like they're just someone who comes in.
Mm-hmm.
I want them to know that they're valued and that
Yeah.
they're important and that we're there to support and help them.
Yeah. Now, of those, let's say 100 or so people who come for dinner, your guests, what's the breakdown of that group? What would that group be composed of?
Well, we have seniors
Mm-hmm.
who come. Some of them I've shared their stories with me, and it's a piece for them is for socialization and to have a good meal that they might not be able to prepare on their own in their home.
Mm-hmm.
They also donate, which is great because it's a piece for them, right?
Yeah.
That it's not that they can't make this at home, it's just that they don't have the facilities or the, it's hard to cook for one person sometimes.
And maybe it's even harder to cook when all you've got's a microwave.
Exactly.
And you didn't grow up in a microwave.
No. We have a lot of middle-aged men.
Yes.
We have families with
Mm-hmm.
young children. We have teenagers and older teens.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really a mixed group for sure. And it's amazing to see how they all interact with each other and take care of each other at times too.
That's one of the things I've always appreciated about the communities on the margins. There is very much a sense of watching out for each other.
Mm-hmm.
Very much a sense of watching out for each other. I remember recently I was visiting someone in the downtown core of Owen Sound, and next thing I know, someone was poking their head around the corner, knocking on the door, and the person got up and went to the door, and this person who had knocked said, "Just wanted to make sure everything was okay. Didn't recognize that vehicle out there, or that guy who was standing there. Didn't recognize who they were. I wanted to make sure everything was okay." And that's a very strong sense of community and neighborliness that I think is well worth remembering for all of us.
Mm-hmm. And it's often that they'll come and tell me, "Oh, so-and-so's sick. Could I take a meal to
Yep.
go for them?"
Yep.
And they'll deliver it to them. And I just think that that's amazing to see and to experience and to be part of such a great community that they want to help each other and take care of each other.
Now, Colleen, I'm sure you must see other needs as someone comes in. Maybe you'll see, I don't know, a clothing need or a personal need or a medical need. How does Oshare handle those extra needs?
So one of the ways is by working with our community partners. We like to go to the table with other agencies as much as we can to understand their programs and know what they have going on so that we can refer our guests to those organizations. So if they have a need for clothing, we can send them to the Salvation Army. If they have a need for housing, there's Y Housing or Safe and Sound. And so just all those community programs, United Way. And so we like to be able to point them in the right direction, give them the phone numbers. We have a phone in our place that they're able to use to make some of those phone calls or to at least leave a message to let them know they'll be in. And so that's a big piece, is working with those other amazing community organizations.
Yeah. It's a very useful, helpful, and positive way to meet people's needs, because sometimes people just don't know, or if they do, they don't trust. Now, do you see people, is the group that comes into Oshare fairly, I won't say static, but it's people you know as regulars? Do you see new people coming in all the time?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
We definitely have some people who are there all the time, but even last night I said to our cook Grace, I said, there are so many people here that I've never even seen before. And so there's definitely that come and go aspect as well, as people need the service and then maybe don't for a while and then come back. So.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about your volunteers. How many volunteers do you have at Oshare?
We have over 140, and they are, I know, it is amazing. This is, I've worked with lots of organizations over my life, and this is the first organization I've worked with where we are just blessed with so many volunteers, always needing more, because when we use 8 to 10 a night, obviously that takes a lot to run an organization over the month.
If you use 8 to 10, you could expect to be, and you have about 140, you said, volunteers. You could expect to be in there every couple of weeks.
Yes, and some of our volunteers are once a month, and so we definitely need lots for turnaround. We also have volunteers who do Zayers pickups and do other tasks for us, which is great. But they are so dedicated. It's just amazing, and they last night when I was speaking with some of them, they said that one thing they wish others could see is what a blessing you get out of volunteering with an organization like Oshare, and just what joy it brings to their lives. And so they are amazing. We couldn't function without them. So thankful for them, but they do such a great job.
Now, if someone wanted to volunteer with Oshare, what would they do?
Well, they can call us, or online we have the application on our website, which is oshare.ca, and they can just fill out the application. We do require a police check because we work with a vulnerable sector. We have kids and seniors in our facility, and then we do an orientation, and then we get them started.
Good. Now, you mentioned a moment ago doing a run to Zayers. Does that mean that the food stores tend to give you product that is just going off code or excess stuff that they have?
Sometimes we get calls from places to do that. Yes, it just depends on this individual store policy. Zayers is great for giving us their baked goods.
Oh, right.
So we pick up bread and things, so people do that for us. Some other organizations in Owen Sound do similar things when they have extra, or if they get in an order that they maybe can't use all of. Right. They'll give us a call.
That's nice.
So, yeah.
And it's a great way to make sure that it gets used and people don't go hungry. Yeah, it's wonderful. What would a typical meal at Oshare look like? What's on the menu for tonight, if you know?
What's on the menu for tonight? I don't know tonight's yet. I usually find out when I go in, because that's the other thing about working with donations, is sometimes it can change. So what Grace thinks she might be having, the doorbell might ring at Oshare, and it's an organization dropping off something that's been made in a prepared kitchen, and all of a sudden the menu changes and we're having roast beef because that's what they're dropping off.
Wonderful.
But typically we do some sort of starch, so a potato or rice or pasta, and then a vegetable, and then some sort of protein. Sometimes it's a casserole, just depends, and then a dessert. So can be anything from fruit to Grace made homemade pies the other day because we had a whole bunch of apples that she froze in the fall when all the apples were getting dropped off. Grace is amazing for freezing all our produce, and so she pulled out all these apples and made fresh homemade apple pies for everyone, which was such a treat.
I'll bet.
And yeah, it's a really good, nice hot meal typically. So
save your fork, there's pie.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's great. And Grace is that kind of cook. She's able to sort of work on the fly as it is.
Yes, it's amazing. We kind of joke that it's like Christmas every day in there, because the doorbell rings, you open the door and you have no idea. So many organizations do food drives for us, and we don't even know they're doing them till the doorbell rings and they say, oh yeah, we've been collecting food for the last 4 weeks, here you go. Or turkeys, or it's just been amazing.
great. Now, on the subject of donations, Canada Revenue Agency has got some particular rules around that. You and I were discussing this before we went to air. And the best way, if I had, let's say I had, I don't know, 24 loaves of bread I wanted to donate to Oshare, how would that work?
Well, the tricky part with CRA is that we have to have an independent consultant appraise whatever you're donating to assign a monetary value to it.
So I can't say that each of those loaves is worth $100.
No, they won't let me do that and tax receipt you for it. So basically, we just ask for donations of food.
Yes.
If you're a supplier and we can work with you to pay you and then you can give us a check back, then that's fine. But with the appraisal process, it just makes it really hard for us to do gifts in kind.
And it can be expensive.
It can be very expensive to pay someone to appraise the 25 loaves of bread.
So what would happen is, let's take that 20 loaves of bread. If I were to give them to you, you would have to purchase them at face value, the tag value, and then I in turn would write a check back to you, and you would then write a receipt back to me.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's a lot of paperwork.
It is, and I know from my work in the sector, it's one of those things. But CRA does like the I's dotted and T's crossed. They do,
and they prefer a money transaction when it comes to receipting for tax receipt purposes.
Oh, I know. So if people do have those donations, that's the way to do it, is that you purchase, then the donor writes a check back, and they get the receipt. Yeah. What's next for Oshare? I know there's things you can't talk about.
No, that's
but what's
okay.
next?
Well, our lunch program just started in December, so that's a big piece for us is to keep that sustainable and figuring out the kinks and things in that. We've already tweaked it a bit that lots of weeks we'll provide a hot lunch.
Okay.
So that it's still to go, but it's a hot lunch so that they can take it, and it's especially in the winter months.
Yeah.
We're also going to be starting a mentorship program with some of our guests who would like to build some skills, doing what we already do. So we're not going to be doing things outside of preparing food, but life skills in what we already do. So that's going to be coming in the new year.
Yeah, sure. In 2017.
Yes, and so that's a big piece that I'm working on right now, is coming up with some skills and jobs that we could have them help us with, and so that it builds their skills and self-esteem and all of those pieces, and also makes them a part of our team.
Sure.
At Oshare.
Sure. I've always remarked on how generous people who are on the edges actually are. They look after each other, but they're also incredibly generous, and they very much want to offer themselves as well. So that's great. That's great. Now, that I heard on, it might have been at Ministerial about the weekend lunch program, was that someone was so thankful because they were not eating between Friday night and Monday.
Yes, and that's how it started, because we were hearing from our guests on Monday. Sometimes they would come and they would just be so hungry, and we open the doors at 4, but we don't serve till 5. And a couple weeks I had a gentleman coming and asking if he could have the carrots that we were chopping up just to hold him until that hour, because he was so hungry. And so I went to the board and said, this is what's happening. There is nothing on the weekend. We said that we wouldn't start another program until we were sustainable. We've now been around for almost 4 years. I think that maybe it's time, and they wholeheartedly agreed. And so the lunch program started. It's a nice program because it doesn't need as many volunteers. It just takes 2 of us to hand out the lunch. But we now have a group of people who come in on Friday mornings, which we've never had a morning volunteer opportunity. And they make all our lunches that we can make ahead of time, sandwiches and things, so that it's all prepared for Saturday. So it's been really great because it's opened up another volunteer experience that we never had before.
Well, that's great, Colleen, because I mean, Oshare is one of those things that sort of is there, but it doesn't have a really high profile. But it's an essential part of our community. So I want to thank you for being a part of FaithWorks today and telling the Oshare story, because it's an important story for our community. And yeah, we'll get you back to tell more. All right.
Sounds great. Thank you.
And thank you, friends, for being a part of FaithWorks. I'm David Shearman. My guest has been Colleen Trask-Seaman of Oshare. God bless.